Hi everyone. I'm Meirav. I'm Director of Engineering at GitHub. I own NPM today, the Node Package Manager, the registry for public Node packages. But actually today I'm not going to talk about that at all, not about the past or not about my teams that are doing actually really interesting stuff, but I'm actually going to talk about the future, specifically about the future of developer tools. So we can all agree that today as developers, we have a lot of repetitive and boring tasks that we have to do, such as some off-client or HTTP clients or some CRUD operations. And we don't want to do it over and over again. So what we do, we go to the community. We go to Stack Overflow and Google and Kaggle, and there are a bunch of platforms that does that. And so with basic syntax search, we just go into the search engines and look for what we're looking for, and we find a solution. Usually we copy paste it, maybe something similar to that, into our IDEs. What's the problem with that? This is just error prone and confusing and causing some distractions. You leave your IDE, you go to the web, you look for some stuff, and then you find to go back to your IDE and decide if the solution is good or bad and make some adjustments. So we can all agree that this is error prone and just not efficient. But I can all agree that the community is still important and we still want to use that information. So if I had a way to have all of this inside an IDE without the need to go into the web and getting that information inside my IDE, I'll probably be much more efficient and there is much likely chances to actually make mistakes. So with the technology, the rising of AI and other intelligent auto-completion tools, there's a new lines of products that are coming, and I think they're going to actually affect all of us developers. These tools are Tab9 and Kite and CoPilot. There are others. These are the most known ones. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these and how they actually work and how we can all benefit from them. So to be able to talk about those products, we actually need to talk about a little bit how the technology behind it. And to understand the technology, we need to know who are OpenAI. OpenAI is a company, a lab search company actually, that they aim to make AI accessible for everyone. And the way they do it by providing a public API so people can use their AI models. What they also did, they actually invented the GPT model, which is the model that all the tools that I'm going to show today are actually using. GPT is a generative pre-trained transformer models, which is a subset of the NLP, natural languages processes. These processes are aimed to understand the unstructured human language, to understand what it means and try to make some informative or meaningful understanding and sentences out of it. What was groundbreaking with GPT was that they tried to train their models on something more general than other NLP models, and they also decided to use unsupervised model. Unsupervised models in machine learning mean that the models doesn't know if what they predicted is right or wrong. And so in order to do that very well, they had to train on a lot of data and had to put a lot of parameters to actually make the models be able to recognize what's similar or not and how to predict information. So GPT-2 is actually the first one that is being used out there in the wild. And if all of us using text messages and smartphones, that autocomplete that we have, some of them are using this model. The big difference between the previous one that I talked about and this one, this one is actually trained on 10 times more of data and 10 times more of parameters. Oh, and this one is really great, and what it's really great in is predicting the next word in a sentence, giving some history before that. So Tab9 is an example of using this GPT-2 model, and as you can see in this diagram, that they have this plugin that is listening to the IDE, listening to the events happening on real time in the IDE, sending to the GPT-2 model the context of the file that you're running in right now, and the events that are happening all the time. And that GPT-2 model is trying to suggest and predict what is the next word while you're writing your code. What is interesting in Tab9 is that their default configuration is installed locally on your machine, which has really great two benefits. One, it's super secure. Your code does not leave your machine ever. And the plugin becomes really, really suited to your needs because it's learning what you're choosing from their suggestions. However, GPT-2 models need a lot of compute power, so if your machine is not very strong, these plugins will be very slow or even non-responsive. This is a really quick demo when you can actually see this live. When it looks very similar to IntelliJ, but the difference here that it's looking for the context of everything happening in this file, and it's giving you prediction by listening to what you chose just before that. So GPT-3 is the next subset, the descent of GPT-2. And what's a big difference between the two is that it's trained in even more data, 10 times more data, 10 times more parameters. And this one is actually able not to predict only one word. It's actually a sentence, a text. By a title, it can write a whole article. And it can actually even have a conversation by writing questions and answers. And OpenAI Codex is a descent of GPT-3, which this one is trained specifically for programming languages. Microsoft has did a collaboration with OpenAI, and they trained on all GitHub open source repositories to get this one to be able to predict the next prediction of not only one word like we saw in tab 9, but actually full functions. So CoPilot is actually using that engine, and this is in a beta preview, so you need to opt in to actually get it. And it supports only two programming languages and maybe 3 IDEs. It's very similar to tab 9. It has a plugin that listens to the IDE with real-time events. It listens to the context of the file that you're actually working on. And the models itself of Codex is trying to give suggestions for the user while using it. What the difference with 9 is that CoPilot is totally hosted in the cloud, which means that all of us using this are big players in the product delivering how it will grow, because it will learn from what we choose every time. So in a really quick demo here, please work. So you can see that only by the comment it was able to actually give you a full function. So there are a bunch of great reviews on all these tools, time saver, and it's autofill repetitive code, and it's even a spell detector. But there's also critiques, which is not surprising, right? So sometimes they will try to invoke functions and variables that don't even exist. They're not really good in all the different languages. They're slow and not responsive. Now, of course, there's a lot of reason why is that. I tried to kind of write here what's the most interesting one. So right now, they're not working well because they're just using the file of the context. We all usually work on projects with a lot of files, and environments and functions are not on only one file. And another interesting thing is that they have learned that all these machine learning, if they have put more and more data into it, actually their efficiency becomes lower and the performance is slower. So they actually needed to reduce a bit of data and reduce a bit parameters from the original models. And that way we're actually getting a little bit in accuracy. But the most interesting one is that these models are relatively new and they actually need to be trained. Now, with all of these reasons, none of us can do much. We just need to wait for the next version to come out. But there's only one thing we can do. We can contribute by actually using these tools and making them much, much better. So, of course, with any new technology, there are still challenges that yet to be solved. The most one is a security risk. Some very sophisticated hacker can identify the patterns of these auto-completing tools and put in the open repository a malware that will suggest to customers to be used. There's also questions about licensing. What are we going to do if accidentally the tool will suggest some code that is under copyright? And the last but not least is vulnerabilities and bugs. All those models were trained on unverified and unreviewed code. It's just open source out there. And they probably have bugs and vulnerabilities. So today I talked about only one part of the development cycle. But I really believe that DevOps and AI are the future to work us together. We're human. We're not able to manage the amount of traffic that we have today on all the production services. And AI can help us become much better and much more efficient. And there are also already today a lot of tools that use AI that are trying to help deliver that. Code reviews and software testing, monitor systems, resource management, and anomaly detections called AI Ops. So today, I hope that by learning about these tools and how they actually work, we'll not be afraid of the fact that AI, I think, are going to be part of all of our developer lifecycle. And instead, we're going to be excited about AI and actually want to have those in our systems and maybe even contribute. Thank you for listening.